So where have you been?
Hard to explain.
Beating heart inside a brain.
Brilliant.
He's always hungry.
Try explaining.
What will I do now?
What you do best.
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
You have done nothing. Nothing.
Rubbish!
This changes everything.
What else could hold all stories?
We are still on track. And then I will cut them off.
Want to hear a story?
No.
Look. On.
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open. And if you're looking for our 6-word story, normally our 6-word story could be all of time and space randomly. But now, for these episodes anyway, our 6-word story is all of season 2 hot takes. Wait, that's 6. I was going to throw in babes if you want a 7-word story, but there we go.
I like
all
the 7-word version.
Hot takes. I'm Chris Taylor.
I'm Pete Pachal. Sorry, I jumped in there like everybody knew who we were. Sorry, out of nowhere, my voice appears. Is that of 6 words? Yeah, we'll call that my story. Yes, Chris and I were a couple of guys, couple of journalists, couple of folks who really like Doctor Who and like talking about it even more, especially when it is fresh out of the oven, like the most recent episode that just aired. Does we even say aired anymore? Just streamed, just went out.
It went out on the World Wide Web.
There it is. There it is.
Yes, there we go.
It was the story and the engine. And I might point out that the and is in the form of an ampersand.
That's right. Update your spreadsheets with an ampersand. The story, ampersand the engine, is what we're here to talk about. And also update your spreadsheets for when the Doctor first visited each continent. You'll notice that spreadsheet is largely occupied by William Hartnell, who visited Asia, Central and South America, North America, Antarctica. I mean, that guy got around.
He did. Didn't he go to Africa, though? I feel like there was it was part of the chase.
Oh, yeah, in the
Do you
chase.
remember? That's where that...
Yes, you know what? That's right. William Hartnell got there first as well. You are absolutely right. That the horror
the horror of the
chase was technically in a fun fair. And I cannot remember which African country it was.
Ghana?
In.
I kind of feel like it was Ghana.
It was Ghana. Yeah. Sorry, Nigeria. You're not the first country to be featured in Doctor Who. There was, of course, also Egypt in the Pyramids of Mars.
Of course.
Although the Doctor did not technically go there. It was briefly in the intro, but...
No, he popped in when he had to go through. It doesn't matter. He was there. He was in Sutek's tomb for a second. Remember that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So he was
All
there.
Right. All right. So Tom Baker visited Africa, but now the show has finally fully visited Africa with the story in the engine, set in a barbershop, a bottle episode in a.
Don't forget
barbershop.
Lanzarote.
Lanzarote, which is Spanish, I believe.
Right, is it? Oh, yeah.
Yes,
oh, God, I should... Okay, I'm going to edit that out.
Getting close. Getting close.
Failed my geography lesson.
Just across the straits,
the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes, just very, very tiny gap between Spain and Africa. I've taken that ferry. Yeah. But anyway, yes, we're getting a little blown off course here on our way to Lagos, Nigeria in 2019, which is where it's set. This is a story, if you don't know anything about the author of this story, Inwa Ellams, first of all, the first black man to have written a Doctor Who episode. There have been several black women. This is the first black man. He wrote a play called The Barbershop Chronicles, and in Nigeria, he grew up watching Doctor Who, and he watched it on a projector screen. So if you're wondering about the very meta nature of that projector screen that we see in the barbershop, in the story in the engine, where you see, I guess for the first time, the Doctor Who titles coming in on something in show, right?
Yeah, that was really cool. I got to say that transition was pretty impressive. Just on the writer for a second. I got to say the whole idea of write what you know. Like, holy cow,
Yes.
he leaned into that.
Seriously, I gotta give props for the Barbershop Chronicles. How he wrote it was he went to 60 different barbershops in both London and various barbershops in Africa, and just recorded the conversation. Just get the feel of it. And the whole idea of the play is it's set during a single television event, which is a football match. So all these barbershops are watching the same thing on TV. That's the thing that unites them.
Kind of figured it wasn't the last episode of MASH.
Hey, that one's a hit in the barbershops. My God, they go quiet there. But yeah, so it's definitely right what you know, but like taking it to a different level. A barbershop that is also a spaceship on the back of a giant spider on a giant web that's made of stories. Pete, what did you make of all of it?
It was really mental, and I got to say the what you just described there, obviously explains a lot on where it came from, but also explains just the authenticity that you feel watching this episode. I mean, it might be one of the most sort of authentic episode, however you sort of define that word, but it just felt very real. Like that these people were real and they weren't caricatures or cutouts or stock characters.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of different faces in the barbershop, so not everyone is fully fleshed out, of course. But, you just got like, oh, I'm being transported somewhere that I know I've heard about, described, and maybe even seen in bits here in movies and stuff. But it's really kind of like the setting for this one, which that really, really worked.
And authentic, I think, to the show's history as well. I mean, it's not just the fact that we get one of those wonderful, I always get a tingle down my spine when I see them, compilations of old doctors, right, appearing on the TV screen when the doctor tells his beautiful 6-word story, which, in case you missed it, is, I'm born, I die, I am reborn. Which almost, emphasizes the godlike nature of the doctor himself. So it felt authentic to that. It also, like the idea of being kidnapped by a barbershop, which is essentially what they're doing. It really, I mean, not only goes to the theme of the kidnapped companion, but also, like, it's similar to being kidnapped by a police box, right, in a junkyard. Right?
For sure. Yeah,
the thing that's supposed to be a comforting symbol of society, and it's actually you get kidnapped by it.
Yeah, definitely some parallels there. I like that it's just, well, I wouldn't say I had to sort of persuade myself to like this one a bit, I have to confess, because it is, in addition to being an authentic episode of Doctor Who, it's extremely unusual, and to the sense almost like it doesn't feel like Doctor Who in a bunch of places. It sort of reminds you that's what it is, certainly. I mean, there's the modern pacing, there's obviously the special effects with the giant spider and stuff like that. But you are really sort of taken into this different show for big chunks of it. And so it almost ends up being kind of like an interesting cultural exploration rather, in with Doctor Who bits, kind of in the Doctor Who universe. So in other words, you gotta have to mentally prepare yourself for that. That was kind of my journey on this one. It's like, okay, this is just one, it's very unusual, but also it's just such a mishmash of strange imagery and unusual characters. And then they're bringing in references to gods and things like that. And as a professional nitpicker, as I am, I do have things to say about that. But I mean, I think to really enjoy this episode, you kind of have to put aside your regular sort of Doctor Who lens and judge it by something that's closer to on its own merits. And in that sense, I think once you do that, you can really kind of like appreciate the storytelling, like within the show and the script itself a lot more.
Yeah. I know it is. I like that it's fresh and that it's challenging in some parts. I like that it looks and feels different because, that this is the strength of Doctor Who, that it can be many, many different things, that it can change, and that it can also kind of bring in elements of its own retconned past, right? We got the return of the fugitive doctor.
Yeah.
Just one scene, the scene that, you know, where it is revealed that it was basically her who played against Anansi, the spider god, and I'm going to need to watch it a few more times to figure out exactly what happened in that long ago time. But I believe that she was promised Anansi's daughter, who appears in the episode. But yeah, I mean, that could have been a lot harder to keep track of, that element and all of these disparate elements, because they are trying to shoehorn a lot in.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my point. I kind of stopped trying to keep track of it. It did, like, in other words, like, I don't know. I mean, you know, you can argue this or that, because obviously whenever you bring up Fugitive Doctor or pre-Hartnell stuff, you have to wonder, like, well, like, how could he remember that? You know, like, how could the 15th Doctor, the Gatwa Doctor, even know what the Fugitive Doctor was up to? Because last we heard about those memories, they were lost in the TARDIS somewhere, and there's been no.
Yep, I know exactly what
heard from them since.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I had my headcanon in that moment, and I think it's the mark of a good episode that like you want to headcanon these things. Hey, thumbs up for headcanon. I thought that, well, what must have happened is somewhere in all the Doctor's dealings with the Fugitive Doctor, and or handling the pocket watch at the end of Flux, like something about just touching it before she drops it into the core of the TARDIS, may have allowed some of those memories to leak out, or like maybe it was the presence of Anansi's daughter. But like I saw my brain scrambling to provide the headcanon here, right? My brain had a heart in it, as it were, and what else is the story?
It does kind of take you out of the show a bit, because then you're sort of trying to make up in your head as a Doctor Who fan, like, how does this even work, and why is she here? As much as it makes sense outside, like, you know, obviously they're doing a show that's featuring this piece of African culture. They're taking advantage of the fact that Gatwa is black, and that he can sort of make this connection better than any Doctor previously. And, you know, they want to also simultaneously remind us, well, he's actually not the first Black Doctor, because we had Joe Martin before. So they're kind of mixing, and all this seems appropriate, and you get it, like, if you're outside the show, you know what I mean? And that's kind of my sort of my problem with it, if I have a problem. But it's also, like, I think that the way they structure this in such a surreal way, you're kind of already in a mode to kind of overlook it and not have your nitpicker head on, right? You're like, oh, okay, they're doing this weird sort of fantasy thing, which, again, RTD has been giving himself license to do for the past, you know, couple of seasons, really. So you're kind of at a point, almost like where I was at with Moffat, sort of towards the end of his run, like, yeah, man, just do whatever. You know, like, I get it. You're gonna, like, help rely on us to fill in the gaps and do, you know, and that's kind of where I was at with this episode in terms of the headspace I had to be in to sort of appreciate it.
But to stick with the theme of the heart and the brain, which I think is a brilliant analogy for what story is, I do think the story had a heart in it. Like, I know what you're talking about, like, and there are some franchises, naming no names, Rise of Skywalker, where you just sort of, like, if you know you're going out, you think you're going out with a bang, and you're just sort of throwing a mishmash of things on screen, you know, that are almost like fan service. This is not that. And I also like that RTD, like, if he's going out with a bang kind of thing, but he's tackling big themes. He's talking about gods and stories, and kind of almost going further than American Gods or Nancy Boys, the whole Neil Gaiman exploration of this same kind of theme. Like, you know, what are gods? How do they thrive on belief? How can you cut them out? And it's interesting that after, or rather within this larger battle with the pantheon of gods from another universe, we have the Doctor saving the gods of our universe that they're already here, and saying, no, you can't kill them, you can't wipe them out. Gods are essential to people. He says at one point something like, you know, you're going to make 7 billion people's lives worse if you take God or the gods out of the equation, which is an interesting thing for the show. The show is coming out as pro-God, and it's sort of of a piece with Lux, right? Where that sort of beautiful ending of Lux, where Lux is saying, I mean, if you've seen our short video, you know exactly what happens at the end of Lux.
If you're one of the 2 million people on YouTube,
oh my God,
who has seen our short video.
We didn't want to humble brag, but there it is. But yeah, if you've seen that, there's that wonderful line where Belinda says, "Oh, so he's just gone there. He's invisible, eternal." Like there's something 3 lines like that, and the Doctor says, "Amen." And I like that. Like it feels like a respectful exploration of storytelling and religion and gods and big themes, and what is religion if not storytelling, and what are tales of gods if not storytelling, like with a real heart, with a really important message for the heart of humanity, right?
Yeah. Again, I think it kind of works for this story. I will say it's like my right and left Doctor Who brain really are at war on this point, because like the whole, I know, they've been doing stuff with the Pantheon and calling them gods, and they even sort of recruited Sutekh into that, even though the old series called him a siren, sort of like a powerful alien or something. But leaning further into it by having these gods of legend be actual gods, and establishing that the Doctor has gone back and met a bunch of them and drunk wine with them and or watched Marvel movies with them or something. Like there was like that was kind of a nutty point there where I was like, wait a minute, like why are you referencing this other franchise, particularly since the guy just mentioned Loki? I mean, that's enough. But
yes,
anyway,
yeah. Well,
I mean,
obviously that Loki is just a made up Loki based on the real Loki.
Yeah. So again, my sort of the left side of my brain didn't like that, whereas sort of the right side of my brain for this story was more like, oh yeah, I like that he's calling him out on this lie and sort of using it as sort of a way to sort of get further down into his identity and his real motivation. And I did like that they kind of made that sort of a mystery box to unlock. It was integral to the plot. Again, you sort of have to go with it, this whole theme and the barber stuff and the haircuts. And then he gets Shooty gets those, I guess they're cornrows or something, like basically the whole the braids. Yeah, as a map, which was kind of neat. And all I could think of, I got to say, I can't be the only one out there who thought Prison Break. This is just like Prison Break, like because I don't know if you've ever watched Prison Break.
Is that part of the plot?
It's similar. It's that he gets a tattoo that's very detailed, which is essentially their escape plan. It's kind of a map. So it's kind of like it's sort of similar, kind of like your maps on your body kind of thing. I thought that was a bit clever. I mean, it was certainly better than some of the other plot twists. I liked it better than, say, like every ninth word the robots didn't understand back in the season premiere, for example.
Yeah, that one was a bit random. This one felt a bit more earned.
Yes,
I think, because you get the whole story leading up to it. Yeah, I mean it's very, very interesting. It could have gone so badly, I think, and to your point, there are definitely things that we're going to have to figure out and headcanon and look at on a second viewing. I will say my second viewing went much better. I've enjoyed this more the more I've watched it. I think this might be one of those bottle episode classics in the long run.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's the middle part to me was was the weakest part, where I honestly just think the storytelling and the exposition goes on too long. I think there's something off with the pacing when they're all in the barbershop, and it's just it's not even like, again, it's not even storytelling. It's more like exposition when he's explaining how the guy came to the barbershop, sort of took it over, and then they start essentially a conversation about like how to unravel what this is and other stuff. So I didn't, and I felt like the next sort of piece of action that happens is when the Doctor opens the door. And I honestly, I've just seen this, so I forget quite where that goes, but there was a point where I was starting to check out a bit, to be honest with you, about like the storytelling.
There's definitely build up, but like to your point of like the the visuals and like the word that came up for me after the first time I watched it was hypnotic, and like
that's fair to say, yeah.
It has a beautiful, like I love the music in it. I love that they save the Murray Gold stuff for when the Doctor really becomes the Doctor, and it's all about, his never-ending story, which is just such a triumphant punch the air moment for the show itself. This endlessly, manipulatable, mutatable show that that will probably always be reborn anytime it dies. But other than that, like the beautifully painted screen, I would have loved actually for them to go a bit further with the painting of things, like the beautiful style of the stories that are narrated on that screen. Like, it's a bit jarring when you then see film for Belinda Chandra's day in the hospital, where she saves a woman's life.
Right. Yeah. I did see that. I kind of thought about that, where it's like, why isn't this more painting? And then you kind of just get into the story. I did love the mislead that I'm going to tell some massive cosmic tale about wondrous things, and he just sort of tells this everyday story about Belinda, which was neat. I will sort of ask, like, maybe dumb questions about how did he know that? Did he spy on her long enough? Did she tell him that, etc.? So that was a little off to me. I gotta say, I really kind of didn't like the thing where they showed all the Doctor faces at the end.
Really?
Not that I hated it. It's just that I feel like that's getting really overused. And I don't know. It was just this.
Well, when was the last time we had it? Was it when last thing I can remember is 11th Hour. I'm sure it's been done since then. I mean,
they've had a bunch of stuff in Sutek, and no, certainly it's happened since 11th Hour. I'd have to think about it. Certainly, like in when Whitaker was on Gallifrey, and it was all in ruin, and there was the whole sequence she has with Joe Martin in the Matrix.
Okay.
There was a little bit there, and I think
seeing Capaldi in that, like,
yeah. Oh, Rogue did it. Rogue obviously.
Just the faces.
Yeah,
but like that little chunk of the Capaldi speech from the Zygon inversion.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I'm getting a little tired of it. As a device, like I'm sorry, I hate to say this because I some of the sequences that you've listed off are some of the most electrifying, honestly. Like the 11th Hour to me is one of the best, but it is like any good thing, such as Shooty got Laquine. By the way, did he cry in this one?
He did. Yes.
When did he cry?
I think it's when he realizes Omo has betrayed him.
Oh yeah. Good scene. I like that. But so, okay, check the box.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a real episode of Shooty Got Was Doctor Who. He cried. But back to the thing. Yeah, I think it's getting a little overused. I felt it like it was a little out of nowhere too towards the end. I think specifically, especially if they've just made such a big deal about, the Doctor being black and that he's here in Africa and he's got this, affinity now with this region because he's black, which again I think didn't quite sit right with me. I think, like, again, I get what they're trying to do, but it's also like it's like the Doctor's it should probably be a little more alien than that. He sort of takes on this. There was something a little off about that, as much as it was well intentioned.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just seen it. I'd have to sort of articulate my thoughts a little better on that. But I again, it's one of those things you have to go with, because it's like, for this story, it's like, okay, they're doing this thing that's fairly unique. You kind of have to sort of like turn off that left side, that nitpicky part of your brain, and just sort of figure it out. And then the whole that's what I mean. Like, so the whole tone of this episode is like, okay, we're doing all this celebrating of this aspect of African culture, and then sort of to bring in all the Doctor faces at the end felt like it was not that. You know what I mean? Not in a big way, but in a sort of like, you didn't need it.
I don't know. I think that the line that really sold that for me is when he talks about all his previous regenerations like a barbershop in his head. They're all just chatting. And that's sort of the essence of the episodes, right? The barbershop as a community space. Where you don't just necessarily... I mean, the Doctor doesn't need to go to this barbershop. He says that in the TARDIS. The TARDIS does his hair, which I think we may have to pause and just talk about that, because what was up with like Capaldi, who just did not get a haircut his entire run? That's sort of like one of the defining things of Capaldi. Matt Smith, I guess, had the TARDIS shave his hair during. Like we're going to talk about what is the Doctor's barbershop on the TARDIS like, and is Idris a frustrated barber? Is that what she wanted to be? She wanted to be a hairdresser. But anyway,
I gotta say,
I
yeah.
like that idea. I like the analogy for all the previous regenerations. We've not really had the Doctor ever saying what it's like to that degree, to like have the scene from Power of the Doctor, if you will, the Guardians of the Edge kind of bickering with each other. You kind of imagine that's what it's like in the Doctor's head, and this is a nice new analogy for it. You like that part?
Yes and no. I sort of think about sometimes comparison would be the Trill in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, when they sort of transfer bodies and they have all these memories, and they've done things in the past with that in my mind sort of don't make a lot of sense. Like he's clearly like the same person, in that he's not literally arguing with himself in the sort of schizophrenic kind of sense. But again, Doctor Who isn't like pull out your couch and psychoanalyze the main character, but it is like, is it more like you have a memory of doing something a certain way, but you had a different personality then, so it might be conflicting with what you think should be done now? Like that is kind of an interesting idea. And I think if that sort of was the intent, sort of thinking through it now, it's like, yeah, I think that kind of works. It's just sometimes it feels like they're saying he's like literally hearing voices in his head, which I don't think is good for the character or whatever, or anyone, frankly. Like it's probably a bad way to live.
I think that explains a lot about the Doctor, to be honest. He has to keep talking, otherwise the voices in his head will just kind of overwhelm
It's like his equivalent of the 4 knocks, or the drum beat that the master would hear. Yeah, there's all that. So I want to spend, you touched on the TARDIS, and I will say, like, this isn't just this episode, but it's getting a little random. Okay, it just is. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a return to something more along the lines of either it just gets them here and there to the place, or just like, let's put a clamp on the magic abilities, please, because it's such a contradiction, right? Because there's even a point where Belinda's still in the TARDIS and it's doing this crazy alert thing, and then she's shouting voice commands at it, and it sometimes hears them and doesn't. But there's clearly there's no voice interface back, which is frankly starting to feel a little primitive given all of the AIs that we have today.
There's a mute button somewhere on that console that's pressed.
It's inviting us to think a little too much about the TARDIS, and again, it's Doctor Who and it contradicts itself, sure, but you should have a little bit of consistency in the era itself, at least. I guess what we're getting here in the RTD2 era is that it's a magic box, and it just you could pull out whatever ability you want. My problem is that that's just too much of a plot convenience or Deus Ex Machina sometimes. And so yeah, and also I felt like it why would Belinda just kind of wait in the TARDIS? Why isn't she just going out and doing something? I guess maybe she just didn't want to get in trouble or something, and then cause problems for the Doctor getting reacquainted with his friend.
She immediately does. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of nice to have.
Well, it's the same trouble he's in, though, so doesn't count as her own.
No,
trouble.
Don't forget she gets into trouble before that in the market. She accidentally knocks something over. She has to put her hand up when the policewoman says, "Who's causing all this trouble?" She's like, "Me." It's kind of nice to have a companion.
I don't even remember that. That's so funny. Like, I'm sure it happened, but it's like it's so such a non-event to the story. Like,
it's a blink and you miss it, because somehow she makes her way out of that, and perhaps that should have been connected a little bit more. But no, I kind of I like the idea of a companion who doesn't knows her own mind. She's like, you just go off to the barbershop. But I did have to watch it a couple of times, so yeah, it's a little weird that she stays there. But then, given that we were talking about Belinda in the context of Tegan and the whole captured companion thing, I like the idea that the TARDIS might only talk to the companions for whom it has more affinity, right? Where the TARDIS is like, oh, he stole you too, did he? I let him think that he stole me. I actually stole him. But like, I like the we talked on the Fort of Doomsday podcast. Go back and listen to that, about how Tegan can somehow sort of pilot the TARDIS a little bit while crying, so it somehow talks to her telepathically. But we've got enough room for headcanon here on the TARDIS likes some companions better than others front.
Yeah, I suppose. Though I gotta say, for this episode, I didn't think it was that great an episode for Belinda. Like, she is in the TARDIS for a bit, which isn't, it's not terrible, because it's like the Doctor's doing something a little different here. But then I feel like she when she joins the Doctor, they sort of, she has agency, but it's almost like false agency. Like, her storyline is exactly parallel. Like, she's just basically there to kind of be there. Also, she sort of has she's a little too perfect in what she says in this episode, like in the first scenes, she's like, says exactly the right things to the Doctor. She starts laughing about the God thing, even though how could she possibly know what the Doctor's going to say? Or maybe she's just, it's contagious laughter. So maybe she just did that. And then there's like, she just says like, she's a little too Mary Sue, I would say, in her dialogue in this one. Like, she's kind of just there to be this, kind of like a supportive thing with the Doctor, which I guess is okay, but it's just not really that interesting. I don't know.
She's there to prove that apparently gods and their offspring do not read self-help. Because I don't know if you've heard several times before, read several times before, the phrase hurt people, which is an excellent, I'm not disputing that this is a very important thing that people need to know. Like, this is how cycles of violence perpetuate generation after generation, because if you're hurt, you turn around and hurt other people. I get it. But the idea that she's basically there to teach that homily to the daughter of Anansi. And for me, that was a little bit much, that moment of like, hurt people. Who would have thought you can teach a god new things? I've just looked it up. Apparently, this is a quote from Yehuda Berg, which I know nothing other than that, but hurt people, that's how pain patterns get passed on generation after generation after generation.
It's very important that hurt people heal. And they become healed people, and maybe healed people heal people.
Hey, just
you're
like
welcome,
Belinda
world. Well, yeah, that's the thing with Belinda. The best scene with her is obviously the painting stuff. Yeah. And even that's a little, Mary Sue, frankly. Like, again, I'm using this term erroneously. I realize that's usually a code for a perfect character who can do everything. But I think in a moral sense, she kind of is in this episode. So that's why I actually don't think it's a great episode for Belinda. Okay, let's talk about the crazy mental spider stuff, which was just nuts. Like, I thought it was just so crazy. Again, it's one of those things that sort of makes, I guess it makes a little bit of Doctor Who sense. But I also feel like
that on the Doctor Who scale of 1 to absolutely batshit crazy insane, this is only about a 5.
Yeah, we've done Flux for the podcast, okay? Like, go back to that one. Like, if you want a 10 on the crazy scale, like, go for it. Yeah. This one, I kind of, the imagery is great. I get the storytelling aspect of it. I wish, I don't know what they would have done here. I wish I'd sort of had a little more sense of like what the hell the web was. And like I know they talk about it, but it's like once they're Yeah, it's like this weird. Is it a dimension? Is it it's like it's there, but it's not. Like I just was sort of totally ungrounded when they got there, which again I think is kind of fun on a certain level. But I'm also like it wasn't really connected to anything for me. Not that it has to be connected literally to Doctor Who continuity, but like to something I cared about. That's what it wasn't connected to. So
Well, yeah.
Still cool to look at, though.
Very cool to look at, and I like the concept of story space, of stories forming a real space. I mean, we're all just humans on the back of a piece of rock going through space, and we have to figure out the weird experience of being human. And part of the weird experience of being human is that stories in our head can actually change the physical environment. And not only that, change our brains. Like we can heal ourselves with stories. Our brains are neuroplastic. The more we're discovering about, the more we know that the mental aspect that you have is what you can become. Like the brain does actually matter. So stories matter. So stories have an effect in physical space, but they're not. Like this season is grappling with a lot of stuff. We talked about light being, light's a particle and a wave, and it's weird, and we haven't figured it out as human beings. So it's perfect for Doctor Who to write a story about. Here we have a slightly more metaphorical version of that, but it's still like, yeah, stories are a thing. You can imagine them being connected on a web, a spider spinning webs like you spin tails. Like that makes sense to me. And yes, you do have to start your headcanons, ladies and gentlemen, on the what is the Nexus? How did it get like that? I like that he's sort of a World Wide Web hipster. The barber is like, oh no, I used to call it the World Wide Web, but now there's something much worse out there with that name. So I don't want to call it that anymore. So, Nexus works as well as anything. But yeah, it's made of stories, and then he gets cut out of it. It's this whole question of authorship. Like, do authors get proper credit for the stories? That's should they?
Yeah.
Is it really just about his ego? What is that? And
I guess the imagery was kind of neat. I feel like they could have been more imaginative with it, without necessarily distracting from the story. So here's the thing. I'll draw a quick analogy to a recent podcast we did, which was, it wasn't that recent, but it was like Father's Day, where I, in my own sort of headcanon way, tied the Reapers back to a previous episode, and then Time Monster. Even though there's nothing explicit about it, I don't even know if this is a thing discussed in fan circles, to be honest with you. It might be just my theory. But I liked that it was an interesting enough thing that I wanted to do that. I wanted to sort of tie things and have the Reapers be a thing that I could put in the Doctor Who, how the Doctor Who universe works, a map, like really good episodes do that. Or even good concepts within maybe not as good episodes. And I do, by the way, think as on record, Father's Day is an awesome episode. Here, like this idea of like a fiction space almost.
Yeah.
Has been done in Doctor Who, and the most prominent example, I don't think you've seen it, is the Mind Robber.
Mind Robber, yeah. Yep.
And I think it's been done sort of a little bit here and there in other places, but that's the most obvious one. Now, again, I'm not at all saying this script should have had some explicit connection to the Mind Robber. Absolutely not. I think that would have been ridiculous, distracting, and only done for fan service. But
although Troughton was right there. Troughton was the first Doctor. I wonder if that was a Mind Robber reference.
But it would have been nice to sort of like, and I guess might be doing it in a way now of like, being excited like about this space that I want to attach it to that, right? And I'm only kind of think I'm doing that now as an exercise in the podcast because to demonstrate that it wasn't quite cool enough and to sort of want to do that, right? Like even the spider going somewhere, they talk about the destination, and it's like I still didn't quite get like the where, right? I get what he wanted to do to the gods, but I didn't understand like why does it physically have to walk in this space for some reason when everything's magical and sort of teleporty in a way.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That would have been the work of a few lines to just say it's going to. I mean, my understanding is that it's sort of just going to some nexus points within the nexus to cut a few connections that will then cut the gods out of the nexus. Like you snip enough threads, I guess, and the stories of the gods all vanish, like they never existed.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I mean, I guess I just like I say, like you got to be able to, if you're asked to come even more than halfway. Like I love headcanon as much as the next person, but it's a continuum. It's not like I'll do all the headcanon on this. And I would say this made me go more than halfway, like 60-70% to fill in enough of that. And once you're doing that, it's a measure of how much you're enjoying the show.
Absolutely.
As to whether you're going to endure that. I wasn't quite there. I was into it, but I was like, I'm just having it wash over me. I'm probably not going to care too much about this after, and that's why it's probably not going to be as memorable as an episode as I think it could have been. It just wasn't quite tangible enough for me. And again, it's not really a tangible story, but then that's the risk you run, right? That it's just it's not really tied into anything. I
will say, after viewing it 2 times, my headcanon engines are more primed. I know what you mean. We've definitely had that experience on the podcast before, haven't we? Of like, oh, I can't even be bothered to headcanon this, right? You're absolutely right. It is a measure. When a story is bad, we're like, I could headcanon this, but who even cares? I don't think this is that. I think this is the other category of like, it needs a little bit more work, but watching it again, like it has. Like we've talked about the beautiful fever dream aspect of Doctor Who. I think this has that, but we will have to wait until our cold take, or maybe even our Goldilocks take on all of season 2 to talk about it more. I do want to ask you a question. Do you know the 6-word Hemingway story that the Doctor is referring to that is now?
Oh, you're just shaming me now on the podcast. No, I didn't Google it. I don't know it.
It is, you probably know. I feel like everyone kind of knows it, and they're like, oh, that was Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought the another 6-word story for this podcast could be not for sale podcast, slightly worn.
Yeah, I was going to say well worn.
Well worn. Well,
we're 5 years into this thing.
We're not even halfway through our random journey through the story web.
And they just keep making this show.
I do have to give a shout out for my pal Larry Smith, who runs 6-word memoirs. Go check that out at 6wordmemoirs.com. It's a whole thing. The Doctor has inadvertently kind of mentioned kind of an entire industry. Like, Larry and many people are kind of involved in getting kids to write their own 6-word stories, right? It's a really brilliant exercise in brevity and communication and choosing just the right words, right? And poetry really is what it is in 6 words. So I like that, we've got the educational aspect of Doctor Who in there as well. Any kid watching this on a projector in Nigeria from behind their couch, like the author is going to be like, oh, what's my 6-word story? So that's awesome. We do want to hear, by the way, people out there, your 6-word stories. If you would like to type in your 6-word reaction to this episode into the comments section down there, please do so. Pete, what else do the fine folks need to know?
They need to know, Chris, they can also reach out to us on any social network at Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63. We're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, and I hope you're watching us there, because we've got a lot of virality apparently going on there right now.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
We're on all the networks, and you can also become a true companion of the podcast. A little reminder that will get you some special emojis here on YouTube and our eternal thanks, of course. Yes. And you'll probably even get these podcasts a little early for our regular ones. Obviously, the hot takes just come out when they come out. Comments. You said comments. You can comment on Spotify. I know a good chunk of our listeners listen on Spotify. Hey, Spotify has comments. Just comment. We'll reply. Promise.
Right there. Cool. Yeah, we usually have polls on Spotify, but we'll return to that when we return to our random adventure with the Curse of Peladon coming soon.
Oh, you haven't been checking the polls? We have some random polls on these hot takes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness. I haven't been checking them. Well, I know what I'm doing after we stop this podcast. I'm going and voting in all those polls because you can vote for years and years and years afterwards. We keep them open, and if you're in line, stay in line. And yes, we should also mention that we will be Pull to Open 63 on the Storytelling Nexus just as soon as we find out how to sign up for an account. Pete, any last thoughts on the story on the engine?
I have one, which is that I don't know why Belinda is in such a hurry to get home when she knows something's bad has happened to the Earth in the future. Like I was hoping this would happen, and maybe you could maybe backread into the urgency of the lines and how sort of agitated she is. But I thought after the well that we would get a change in tone there, where it's less about her being home, but finding out what happened to home. And yes, they could still do the Vindicator. Yes, the plan, the best thing that the Doctor could think of is still to go back to Belinda's time, because clearly that's a problem point. But I would like to see that a little more explicit. So anyway, it's a nitpick. That's definitely a nitpick. But it was like, I thought of it right away when she said it, like, why do you want to go back home when the whole Earth is going to blow up or something at some point, like probably right after?
Well, thank you for adding that to the beating heart within my brain. I will definitely be thinking about that some more. Of course, next week the answer will obviously be she doesn't want to go home because the Interstellar Song Contest is on.
Oh yeah, it is on. Oh
yeah, it's on. And if you've never had the Eurovision experience, if you've never played Ya Ya Ding Dong, shout out to the Eurovision Song Contest movie.
I think it's the first utterance of that on Pull to Open.
Ya Ya Ding Dong. All right, well, that's where we're going to be next week. I'm excited for it. I'm going to be doing my singing lessons all week. We will present next week's hot take in the form of songs or not, unless we get enough followers. We will sing next week. So keep following us on the socials, and you might avoid that fate.
All right, take it easy, folks, and Chris and I will go off and get some haircuts now.
Oh, about time.